Hello, there's someone with the name Michelle. I don't know her name. She's involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, intelligence at and next to Connecticut's Channel 3 News. Also with an Enzo Fianza, on off the state judicial branch offices in spots next to it. Involved with the Dillon family and a whole bunch of people involved with the World Trade Center predicate acts. And Saudis, I don't know the names of, and ones that's a friend of mine that they forced, tricked her, persuaded to collusions with them, with a whole bunch of people with Elm Streets in Rocky Hill and Weathersfield who are tied by their rules, acting that they don't even know me, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, sequence shifts, as people who did that from behind my back in campuses. And this is a method that makes people not be able to speak about the truth about the past, honestly. And they're lying about, in other words, they confess like they demonstrate on a mass scale. People value the right to lie and needs to lie, even about things like words that are simultaneously inseparable from how there are dangers, even with peaceful nuclear generation. And it forces people to keep their mouth shut about things. And while and how they came through campuses that, you know, forces people only capable of making confessions to the breaching method itself, therefore to other people too. Because the breaching method knew that uh, one of the things that all those laws were about the American history and other histories, even though they could change and fake what our founders declassified because they read about it afterward and just kept their words used. Tactical terror, then they asked us to have their words used through communications, which is distinct from what is said, let alone from what is said, where and how. It was inside a system with all laws and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and the difference of that as their collusions with even worse, that which had slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies non-distinctly, as that same method that had been sustained against Native Americans through people that had already been sustained against themselves, to keep names A through Z, blaming names A through Z or themselves, or blaming other things, others themselves, for things that the breaching method caused. That's one of the reasons that we never had anyone appreciate where and how the proper answer for what slavery was about, or for what that with the blind, with changing the Native American identity system sickly distinctly from the colonists. In other words, was about we are now systems tactical terror from the human species body of individual bodies with all group differences demonstrating what causes revelations. We have more than just how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time being demonstrated to us. Where and how we have other species bodies also demonstrated to us with quality aspects in nature distinct from ourselves, but also non-distinct, and simultaneously with ourselves this way, but also for that which is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, which is not us, it's not those species bodies, but it is all things anyway. And that's how it is discernible and how it is by nature inseparable from proper words about that. Someone could debate that, legally, but there are ways to illegally debate even things like that, and as criminal foreign influences to cover up use of location slash exclusion, and with differences. See, with people with their uses of names and leaders, like everyone keeps blaming, um, what's his name? Whoever the leaders. In other words, focus on the predicate acts of the facts. Then the guys say, okay, we're not going to give them food because we want to make sure it doesn't go to the terrorists. Focus on their definitions of terrorists. There's still collusions at countries A through Z. They don't know how to speak for the sciences. Forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method that's hyper foreign. It's not names A through Z, except for how they leave it out or blame out other things, others themselves. Till it was is real. And those truths too still are used to keep out the breaching method. A breaching method is a scientific value by nature itself communicated to us. Again, it's one of the things true always, that all those crazy laws were about, that were forced entrenched, even after our founders were died. They, right through their lifetimes, they did not have free speech. They had to pretend other to an extent. Otherwise, they would have been sentenced because there were too many through their own people. Because that's our country's A through Z. We have been systems tactile from natures. It's not really debatable if you pay attention. So they have like Holocaust, certain types of victim / hyper victim only allowed to be. But because also they need to use the word Holocaust to screen how right through, all the different religions still have roles with collusions with psychiatry, right through world wars and through the Civil War. James Madison's plan is what caused the Civil War. One can't explain the Civil War properly if they don't understand where and how and why. Our founders had to leave slavery entrenched. It's not something you vote on unless a breaching method already had everyone to collusions to an extent against themselves and everyone else and had to pretend otherwise be sentenced by the breaching method through themselves. That's what it's all about if you pay attention to what was recorded. So people want to have debates about who read what, about what this breaching method shows. Self-value roles with criminal and seditious natures of positive and negative treatments and names treatments relative to all kinds of other things and subjects in life that are brought up and the timing of it, where and how there are constantly other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, and the hyper foreign at the same time needing to have the same sequence shifts. The same rules with differences, racketeering worse than war crimes, collusion /S, like just with the black people's whites of eyes, denying the significance of it, where and how it's relative, in other words, and like where people's identities are slandered. Individuals, even if they're leaders, to keep what's, in other words, roles with differences. They have readings of statutes and given the benefit of the doubt at the last second, to people based on their degree, etc. At the last second, they're offensively with Russians and Americans, with lawyers of Wethersfield Police and with lawyers of the FBI, former FBI Director Robert Luskin, and demonstrably other lawyers of the FBI and of the Congress, also individually grouped in together predicate acts with fax methods, with people on off the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices and corrections offices, with behavior racketeering worse than war crimes. Stephen Stocko was influenced by the intelligence community to pretend passions and emotions behind my back. And he never had a personal conversation with me in my life. His wife, reportedly his wife, Maria Fuzino, has her neighbors that also I only know involved with them planting evidences of people on off the state judicial branch offices and with their family members involved with time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, a whole bunch of different countries, and names next to the campuses, intercities, and people tied to them who planted fake natures of ties to me on my street in Wethersfield. And they have collusions for some interbranch forging and switching names. People increasingly recorded themselves, setting up instances, and then the person goes by, they lie about why and how they were there, what came before it. In other words, they're trying to film fake things on a mass scale. As people increasingly involved interstates with all sides of criminal and civil cases and the interbranch names and intelligence tied to them. Like New Britain Superior Court increasingly has roles with East Hartford locations and intelligence families born with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids, leaders, first forced. A former Governor Malloy is recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming he has roles with East Hartford campuses, with a principal being involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, also with patients and doctors at Maine University, involved with ones at UConn, also at and next to Hartford Hospital, with how they train state police families, and roles with like interstates with state police families. A bunch of people with the name Jensen, Cololo, Mike Pandolf, Ray Reynolds, a whole bunch of people that sought me out. I never sought that. They sought me out to make all kinds of confessions, demonstrations, or confirmations. People I never saw ever. They tried to make it look like exceptions other too. as people that increasingly with the judicial branch offices, corrections offices, and the Smith family with the Britain Superior Court and other Smith families tied to them. I never had a conversation with all. They're fishing for cover-ups per their roles increasingly every year, intercities. They have an intercities method with confessions that are manifest, right where and how they make demonstrations to the breaching method, for example, collusion/S, with those natures and methods of organized crimes with databases and with differences right through world wars and pretending things are debatable or not, using the right to pretend things are debatable or in speech, whatever, where exceptions are not. You guys aren't allowed to change and fake what's digitally recorded too with the FBI, involved also with the Marines Facebook pages and with Air Force, involved too with this Paul Kelly and their neighbors, increasingly people at Trinity College and next to it, and at Central Connecticut State University and next to it, intercities and intra-cities, intercampuses and intra-campuses, involved with predicate acts with facts. Also, that's that way on all sides of my house with people from other areas connected to and as those acts and roles and confessions and demonstrations to me and to others. This is on a mass scale, keeping self-value roles with criminally foreign influence, tactical illusions, raw syntax of the names of the people, the sciences, replacing, for example, James Madison's communications to us declassified, and their roles with the uses of his plan, the uses of his plan to counter-extort at key locations to force people to an extent to break those laws so crazy against everyone, torture, extortion, fact, human nature, therefore physical slavery against everyone sickly, distinctly. Also to use functionally, how even though it was hurting everyone non-distinctly, northern colonies, southern colonies, more than 13. They had to counter-extort people that have give them no means to defend themselves without relying upon the unity behind James Madison and his plan. In other words, and to force us eventually to get his communications liberated, and then therefore Marbury versus Madison defended properly. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice, black pupils. They are not allowing us to speak about how they've been putting predicate acts with facts in databases. In other words, increasingly people with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices have roles also at and next to various natures of campuses, including the community center of Wethersfield is increasingly involved with people with the World Trade Center attack, with judges and prosecutors and fire departments, family members. And Hartford Hospital has a bunch of overt criminal enterprises and private ones tied to an Abted, Paul Abted, and his family involved with the intelligence community and their roles all along Franklin Avenue in different conjunctions to Harvard Hospital. I don't even know what campuses they went to or who they are. They're planting, they were influenced to plant evidence to have my picture taken with me standing in front of him to make it look like I communicated with him, with a Fred Grisey. A Fred Grisey is one, a stranger from other areas. I don't even know all their names. Increasingly, people trying to put fake ties, fake natures of ties to me with people in my area, increasingly involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids, first force years apart. And they have their extended family members also with different last names involved with it, and with and as ones who have collusions at the World Trade Center and next to it, and the court next to it, and with the difference of guilt, because those same ones were used remotely since they were kids by people and influences from off the campuses that measure and maintain, that are recorded with a method that measures and maintains hyper additional collusions from its own as victim predators / hyper predators, only capable of being per a method or of sensing for the breaching method. Also relative to where and how they have uses of Holocaust that no one even realizes, for example, and the differences between the people attacking the people using the word Holocaust and forcing it, or the people forcing it as the guilt too, is used to screen even more, another name about, including the scientific value of the human factory of nature breaching method. But to discern the rest, you have to discern that, which is also replaced right from the founding communications of James Madison and of the founders behind his plan, plural. And then they went and got George Washington counter-extorted and to counter-extort everyone else too, to an extent. That's why how they had to leave slavery entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies. That's very simple. People shouldn't have to debate that. They get away with having people debate that because those peoples are still roles with criminally foreign influence, natures of industry, and natures of intelligence, styles, natures, logic, pretending of the nature itself used as wire crime acts and methods, self-valued roles, as self-valued roles with predicate acts with facts at and next to, and the differences of guilt at or next to the names next to the campuses. Each one I went. Increasingly, the first campus I went to in Wethersfield, Connecticut, is next to a valley crest. Increasingly, there's a Skidgel family, and involved, like with the exception, I believe, on another street, but their outside of their house touches valley crest. I never had a conversation with them in my life. They're increasingly involved with people from Middletown, Connecticut, and Whiting Forensics, and in that river location. Involved also with a Phil Collusions and Subby Bejeria with more sexual medical offenders of kids, and people having their picture taken near people on the sides of schools that they never saw on the inside of school as their roles of predicate acts with facts put into the databases at schools, and people acting tied to that and their motivations. They increasingly, these are also confirmations. Subby Bejeria has roles with a bunch of intelligence men and women on the sides of Central Connecticut State University. And they said also it's with the people at the campuses too. And the difference of that was exploited. That's in New Britain, Connecticut. Since I was a kid, intelligence with New Britain, Connecticut has been putting predicate acts with facts in the databases, fake ties and fake natures of ties between kids, relative to how they prevent our own history from being told true, including with the news. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. There are people in my fourth grade class who have a Hilton Catterley, and there are other news people involved with the roles with the campuses of a principal being, where they have more sexual and medical offenders. Also, ones with the Leahy family and the kids of judges and prosecutors, and associated with victims advocates. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, not the way they're pretending. They're on a mass scale. They're building upon those predicate acts with facts and the communications with it on a mass scale. The difference of guilt is our side or the other countries, overt criminal enterprise, private one, and terrorists. It's right where and how people are constantly making both sides of issues. They're timing people are gonna walk, and then there'll be a fight or something like that. And every year they're connected because the intercities that rolls with confessions, parallel with the breaching methods uses of confessions. Like, for example, you guys confess without realizing the experts that now you guys have self-valued roles replacing right from the communications of James Madison. What he communicated about the breaching method, what he communicated, had declassified for us, as nature itself does, about how and why they did not have free speech, and layers of it. Even all the truths to pretend the other with too, they're used for lies to screen that too. The only thing that could motivate, let's say, right with black pupils, whites of eyes, relativity. No, people, it's discernible. Nature gives us means to discern. The nature shows what nature shows. So we can make a nature shows, refunctioning for the republic for which we stand, that needs pantheism to be and to stay led by that, how it is. Nature shows us it is functional, being hyper invisible, but still discernible, distinctly from how it is the invisible, but still discernible parts of speech, like why and how. We need more than one name for the verb, and those being the invisible, but still discernible. But like, for example, the participle natures, the present participle and the past participle. These are about also two parts of the complete identity that come simultaneously with our means to discern the complete identity of value/variable regression. That is not our species body, is not the other species body. but it shows us it is all things anyway. Even things that are made up has its trinity, and the difference of that, or how it is five ways grouped, has even the difference of that as value to ourselves. Where and how it shows us why and how we question, and why and how to contemplate, and what to and how to contemplate, and why. But we have been systems tactical ulterior from its own natures itself, black people. Again, this is one of the principal examples. Also, right where and how people have uses of principles where they appreciate relativity and what is constant, what is variable, through and as systems tactical ulterior from its own and this relative. In other words, not one honest voice has been allowed to speak or to be heard for Native Americans regarding distinctly how they are prevented the unity, not just of their own people. How many people want to help the Native Americans, not just for some, powwow to our might, to heal that tactically nation below the ground. The suburbs are designed before America's founders were born. They looked almost exactly like in America, Russia, and Ukraine. The types of the archaeological experts are criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, or quality aspects of nature, distinctly from the experts on law, distinctly from who rely on the experts of self-value, this having been with the experts on history, replacing our founders' communications, collusions, plural, with use of their words, uses of their words, leaving out what they declassified. Again, about how no one had free speech, pretending that's debatable. In other words, through world wars, psychiatry had roles with databases that were in a layer that's first, in a way, the databases of the republic for which we stand became hyper-criminally foreign influenced, and motivations and roles and needs for that were influenced from off the campuses in ways that no one realized. While they were using the ways they realized, and ones just made up to counter the impositions it caused by nature itself in demonstration of that. And by demonstrations that the breaching method made, specifically to get people to blame others ourselves for things that it did and maintains wrongly as collusion/S, as they effectively have been doing with fentanyl, even if it was completely made up. The counters to the fentanyl and to the borders problems, and the counters to that, they are timed collusions with the original method that uses the differences of the guilt of the witch trial courts, of the police forms and the interbranch tied to that. Don't forget, simultaneously, they were involved with slavery, even if that was completely made up. Don't forget and understand, they have a witch trials place right next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Still, layers of narratives by that, communicating tactical ulterior and sense and sensibilities and motivations that can't defend themselves without scenting for the breaching method. In other words, that and how they have other communicated for those founding locations and for our founders, then we're supposed to, you guys won't even allow people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. That itself would have brought up things that nature shows us that you guys are replacing, where and how James Madison himself and the founders behind him, his plan. They communicated other for those places too. You don't leave out how there's a witch trial place next to Webb House, again renamed now. Right where George Washington had the counter extort right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. Now they pretend it's other too. In other words, it's people helping the revolution. In other words, everyone was still roles with slavery, northern and southern colonies and southern colonies, because it was still entrenched roles. They had to force them counter-extorted. That's what our founders told us. You guys have criminal and seditious natures of positive in theater. Yeah, roles. Even with the people with the movies and roles with uses of it. When you guys argue, it's clearer than day. When the nature of debate, how it's criminally portable, tactical conclusions wrong. Black pupils. More of us believe about this. People who are involved with polling locations, research locations. Those campuses are involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime. Whole bunch of federal criminals and people with the intelligence community who had collusions with them before, involved with Kevin Harris and his family members, people tied to them at Quinnipiac University. I don't even know all their names. Involved with judges and prosecutors, their family members, foreign and domestic medical families, military, criminally foreign influence of the World Trade Center attack, and with the names next to it and the differences of their guilt. And that's the court next to it, too. The court itself and names on all sides of that criminal and involved with that civil case. But it also involves criminal law and various natures of federal criminals that are involved with names on all sides of that case in the court itself, with a former director of the FBI and others on off Central Connecticut State University, with Hartford's courts and New Britain Superior Courts and their families and intimate ties, who are also on off the state of Connecticut corrections offices and judicial branch offices, being and having been stayed collusion/S with the World Trade Center attack from years before too, because there are layers of organized crimes associated with the World Trade Center and with natures of industries that are still criminally foreign influence, tactical collusions raw, collusion/S with the differences of guilt, for example, that are also what witch trials are actually about, and what roles with slavery, northern colonies and southern colonies, and with Webb House, what it was actually about. Again, next to Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, the witch trials place. And both those places, with names next to them, increasingly involved with predicate acts with facts. That increasingly people put me to fake ties, fake nature of the ties to people, are bringing up the name Charlie Bowes. And in other words, I never saw him on inside a camp, and a Casper family. One of them is named Chet Casper, and then his daughter is probably, I don't know the father's name. His name might be Chet too. In other words, he's increasingly involved planting evidences, fake motivations with some black KKK, Confederate flag themed, Latino themed, Jewish themed, sexual, medical, and other religious spots, nutbags themed sequence shifts with former mayors too, involved with medical and sexual offenders of kids with overt criminal enterprise, private ones. He has roles with military. We have more problems because you have more people involved with violence with him, with the Smith family near me, and people at Hartford Hospital that brought him up in their confessions, and they're refusing to get on paper and communicate with me. I told you there's going to be more violence involved. I told you that. I told you I wanted a peaceful way to do it. There are more people involved with the Phil Collo on my street, further demonstrating to me their roles with sexual and medical offenders involved with the Phil Collo, and people with whiting forensics, and with Newtown, Connecticut, has the Sandy Hook campuses, increasingly involved with people from Weatherfield, Connecticut, involved with digital crimes with a Ray Collo, a Kerr family, a DeMorrow, and a Joshua Julian on the Facebook page of the Highcrest campus and other campuses in Weatherfield. And Whiting Forensics has digital crimes with them, with Facebook itself too. Facebook has people. It looked just like a Celeste Wells. I don't even know her. I only saw her like one time in my life. Just like I only saw her from a distance too. I don't know her at all. That woman with the name Sullivan, involved with, they said that was reported through the country. And she locked her kid, and he was like, he caught a fire in the house is the narrative. And then the police, the fire department saved him. And in other words, and they have all narratives regarding that. That woman has other police officers with the name Sullivan. And there's a Daryl Sullivan. I don't know if they're related to them, but at that Daryl Sullivan's involved with Alina's Pizza and a tiki bar there, involved with the FBI in foreign countries and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, sexual, medical offenders of people, involved with identity theft and frauds, slanders, roles with with more proven child abusers, leaders of kids then through time, and there were more at the campuses then and now who had roles forcing it. Also with WTNH and the FBI, with a Michelle Shanquest. So there are people with Rhode Island too, increasingly with a Michelle and her family involved with the old Weathersfield and with people who have been spreading lies about me and themselves interstates with boating people and like with Navy people and Air Force people involved with them with next to the news locations intercities involved with predicate acts with facts. And like with this Enzo Fienza, with people involved with the World Trade Center attack with his neighbors and their roles with the state judicial branch offices they live next to. They have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. It's their roles with people involved with body dumping spots with their family and people with the Dillon family all along Two-Route Highway and conjunctions to it who have all kinds of wire crime, mail crimes, people acting and fake ties, fake natures of ties to people so other can record fake things. As some increasingly, those are people out the judicial branch offices and conjunctions to it and to that. In other words. So in other words, these are also the family members of the interbranch that are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, methods that are connected. Know how we have black people as whites of eyes. That's one of the things we are imposed upon. We're in how we aren't allowed to speak for white or black, honestly. Because both nature communicates we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. And the same colors are white and black. And we have had this left out and replaced. And it has relativity / hyperrelativity. Hyperrelativity is real, black people. Look at the birds, the fish. They have eyes. We didn't invent that. They didn't invent it. And we are shown that what is not us nor them, but is all things anyway. That and how it shows us these things, these ways. And we are shown about difference at the same time. There are revelations and demonstrations generated. We have been forbid free speech by people offensively making examples and pretending they're about free speech dishonestly, but also tactically delusions raw. That's why we also need them on paper interbranch from forging and switching names. Increasingly, the FBI has roles influencing like collusions with the online companies, with the policing of the internet. They don't know how to react to it. The intelligence companies, the courts involved with it, the judicial branch offices and corrections offices themselves. They have rules of torture methods, fact cheating nature, slavery methods before the World Trade Center attack. The roles with that showed them they need to hide that by pretending to be about the Patriot Act legitimately, while tactically delusions raw at the same time. That's why it's necessary to get them on paper. Black pupils. Interstates. These are people involved with Rhode Island, New York, and Washington, D.C., and Connecticut, with medical families also concentrated time collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, with the names next to the campuses like Hartford Hospital, as ones who are also collusions with names, the same names have collusions with names next to other campuses that are faked for them by other people. Tim O'Brien has a bunch of people through time, and then years later he had to cover up more lie progressions with the corners of the street of a principal child abuser, a Principal Beans campus on Highcrest Street, and others involved. I don't even know their names at all. Jennifer Kenneth Pickey is involved interstates with people involved with the Jonathan Maiano, also with a CM Faglione family involved with predicate acts with facts at that corner with prosecutors and judges, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people all along Route 3 and involved with them, also with Russians and Ukraine, all along. Forced roles too. But then sometimes it's self-guided roles too, because they're roles with their doctors too. Hartford Hospitals recording, confessing, demonstrating, and confirming they have a bunch of intelligence involved planting evidences with names at and along Griswold Street through time with Russians in Ukraine, forced collusions with them at Hartford Hospital and at Central Connecticut State University. Also, the doctors of them forced. as roles with predicate acts on my street from other areas, as their time collusions with the names at Central Connecticut State University involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and with deans between Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University, and their family members and people tied to them that were influenced by the FBI director and the court's family members and intimate ties, which are also foreign and domestic military before and after the World Trade Center attack. They have distinct natures of predicate acts, intercities and intra-cities. They have methods of them recorded. They have, like, for example, pretending people made conspiracy theories relative to the roles, forging and having forged transcripts and roles of guilt of our country to screen and to maintain cover-ups of it as cover-ups of the hyper-foreign. That's why we're going to pay attention to the overt criminal enterprises and the private ones that hadn't have time collusions with the names, that fake conversations with me, and forged the other names of the other doctors too to make them make other conversations. A big packet just for the first time they did this. And I never had a conversation with this Leahy family. They're increasingly involved with multiple courts at the same time, and people that have been seating juries, involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes with the courts and the state judicial branch offices and the corrections offices and their family members next to the campuses, intercities connected through time. Prepare each mind, boxing, who disbelieves. Judge Napolitano, please repent to him or with him. And please, FBI, same thing. In other words, I don't mean to be like that, Judge Napolitano. I'm sorry, I apologize. Fox Connecticut News, please get them on paper, one name and sequence, and with the Wethersfield Police regarding what I caught them doing digitally with medical and sexual offenders of kids tied to this Brian Silver and a bunch of prosecutors and tied to them at New Britain Superior Court. Increasingly, they have roles with all kinds of uses of investigators and their sources at Covington Street and tied to them. Increasingly, there's a Bobby Jean and there's a guy named Bobby, where they have roles with differences like that. And then a Magdalena and a Maggie, intercities, involved with the people with Park Street and on Park Street, involved with this Daryl Sullivan, with name switching and forging, and with people with the name Sullivan, like that woman who was reportedly involved with that crazy thing. But there are fake news involved with that. Even if that was not made up. In other words, the news has collusions with that and with fire departments. A number of fire departments, intercities, and the names next to them, like a whole bunch of people tied to a former mayors from Wethersfield have collusions with their family members, also with forensics names with the fire departments and with an ILO and others on next to Trinity College with my neighbors involved with proven child abusers, leaders of the kids' first worlds. I never had a class with Joe ILO in my life. He planted evidences, fake exception of the only time I ever saw him in a Wethersfield campus. He has roles with a former Mayor Gold and his sister, and involved with intimate ties at a Harvard at a place. That's why they were putting it. Make it look like she was tied to me intimately at Wethersfield. They do things that are opposite, so they could go back and pretend other motivations all along. In other words. So Joe Aiello and his sister, Angela, or I don't even know, they have more than one sister, and he's got his father, and their roles with spots next to Trinity College and next to Hartford Hospital, where they have roles with predicate acts with the people at Hartford Hospital too, and next to the campuses, and with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, and their roles with like sexual circles next to, including the differences of it. In other words, like the gay people and things like that in those places. I never even went in and involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and with some murders involved. And they start using that to hide things and trying to make people be embarrassed to speak. In other words, with the people intercities connected with the FBI director, Robert Luskin. So they are leaking that they use such crime methods relative to their predicate acts with fax methods. Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others as their collusions with the Saudi attackers and with the people that use the Saudi attackers and the counters with and as collusion/S. And the difference of it is being used too. The difference of guilt, because that's being used to screen the breaching method recorded roles. There are even proofs that we should name this breaching method a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. Black people who disbelieves. Get them onto paper in one name and sequence, please. So Ray Cololo and a Joshua Schumack and a Joshua Julian, a Joshua Julian, Joshua Schumack too, but involved with digital crimes of Wethersfield police and with the with a Violet family, people, a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital and next to them through time. Also, one's roles with that girl dragged to her death from next to Hartford, or reportedly dragged to her death from next to Hartford Hospital and then dropped off at the corner of Goodwin Park and Jordan Lane. And that Goodwin Park is increasingly involved with people that have been planting evidences, had been influenced to stand near me and have people take pictures. And when there's exceptions too, they use that criminally foreign influence tactical delusions raw. And we could also observe that a whole bunch of people next to the state capitol have roles with those three spots at the end of the Burlington Turnpike. They'll tell you themselves if you ask them properly with identity theft, fraud, slanders. A Fred Grisey has roles with a Spada family of sisters and a brother, and people conjunctive to their neighbors, involved with body dumping spots and murders and confessions, including about people could get killed by someone pulling into a thing, pulling and letting someone hit him on the side. And there's an officer on my street who had a partner, reportedly involved with that, with something like that. Years later, and I never met him. And I don't know his partner. I don't know if they have roles with Old Town Cafe. Increasingly, Old Town Cafe has roles with the people with the drugs and the medicines crimes, as the ones that are only allowed to counter that, involved with the corrections offices and judicial branch offices, and the Hartford Hospital campus, where they're putting fake uses of drugs and alcohol into their databases. Also with people with parks and recs. Increasingly, Hartford Hospital has roles with the Wethersfield Community Center and names on all sides of it, involved with organized crimes, with people with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, and the World Trade Center involved with organized crimes, terrorism, before the World Trade Center attack. In that context and since, they also have lawyers of the victims as collusions. No, in other words. And so they all, personally, they are used with the hyper foreign ones too. They're hiding. Don't let them represent us, America, and the FBI. Get them on paper with the courts too, and with the Congress, recording predicate acts with facts methods with them group too. Sequence shift self-valued while being and having been used remotely with a James Comey, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. A former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. We can discern where and how the breaching method has roles, self-valued grouping criminal enterprises and terrorists, wrong as tactical collusions with them, especially against the people of New York City, for example, and cities around the world, while the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and to make people thank God for the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures is to thank God for criminal and ceaseless natures of means to cause positive value nature progressions, actions, and natures also has a collusion /S and styles and natures of logic who can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract short words proper regarding nature, let alone nature and the breaching method as a scientific value, again, replaced right from the communications of James Madison and our founders behind him and his plan. That plan is what caused the Civil War. That plan is what caused, in other words, us to get, we haven't gotten James Madison's communications freed yet. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. Here, Marbury versus Madison, all chant. I'm not even a lawyer. The polling and all the campuses and the different ages and natures and the things they're involved with, like polling. Oh, what do you think about this? Get down. That's not what voting's about. We're going to get them on a bridge. Follow mandated law. Get them on paper, one name in sequence. Connecticut interbranch and the judicial branch office and the corrections offices are covering up what I caught them doing inter-campuses and intra-campuses and intercities and intra-cities. It's recorded. People involved with Rocky Hill campuses, New Britain campuses, and Wethersfield campuses and Hartford campuses and names next to them. You're going to observe how they are used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, with the judicial and corrections offices, as the names involved too, with names next to body dumping spots, even if they were all made up. We're going to use time uses of it as the names involved also with their extended family members, with the time collusions of Wethersfield police, who have fake conversations with me as a kid, now as an adult, as their roles with Saudi attackers, also with people named O'Neill, with wire crimes, with Whiting forensics, and with people with West Hartford locations and campuses, and their families with Wethersfield, and the difference of that. Let's get them on paper, one name in sequence. Increasingly, people tied to a park and conjunctions to it near West Farms Mall and West Hartford are involved with a Joseph Dennis too, with identity theft fraud sequence ships, all natures of investigators use remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw, collusion/S with the worst things, like fentanyl, even though I don't know anything about fentanyl. These are people involved with medical corruption, and they're educators. I never had anything to do with Joseph Dennis. They try to make fake exceptions to pretend other with the people putting fake things in databases behind people's backs. I never had classes with Joseph Dennis. Let's get them on paper, one name in sequence. His neighbors are increasingly like with the mayors involved with child abuses and roles with that park, with others that brought up with the FBI director in the courts, involved with criminal enterprises too, with the ones intercities, with West Hartford locations, New Britain locations. There are New Britain locations and names associated with the people like Joseph Dennis and John Dennis, and all along Route 175. They were influenced by investigators to plant fake and change motivations, sequence shifts, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me, and their collusions with a whole bunch of other people involved with proven child abusers leader the kids first forced. Increasingly, there are two. There's a mother and a daughter, and they're both principals at the same time, and there are people that confessed and recorded them involved with the principal upskirt nature, and the daughter of one years ago involved with the same campus, and others like there's a Michelle Sanquest involved with more sexual and medical offenders of kids per themselves and per the news that had been planting evidences with complete strangers too at corners of streets to where they have roles with uses of investigators, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, rather than they have to cover that up. So they start putting big things and they pretend they received that, and that's why they made that mistake, etc. These are people speaking about crimes that have roles of way worse predicate acts with facts methods, wire crime acts and methods. The people of Hartford, Connecticut have a very few that know they're involved with all kinds of scams more than there are streets in Hartford, Connecticut and Wethersfield, Connecticut connected as one's intercities and intra-cities roles with the differences between the cities too, where it is appreciated by you guys. A whole bunch of people with the FBI and the courts have been planting criminally foreign influence uses of the sense and sensibilities of people at and next to boxing gyms, and people making it so I can't do business with the people I was going to do business with to do boxing. These are people involved before and after the World Trade Center attack with the FBI and the courts, with a whole bunch of different countries, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and their family members in the news at the same time. Increasingly, people involved with this Lena's Pizza on Park Street and other confessions and demonstrations of their roles with Park Street and pretending passions and emotions regarding differences and with delusions and regarding cultural differences, etc. So, in other words, Hartford Court they have a officer Hunter involved along Park Street with the people involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids per themselves. I never, he's involved on Park Street with falsified police reports and confessions of that court from before the World Trade Center attack, and they confirmed it after it has something to do with spots associated next to the city capitol and a lawyer, Robert Chevery, places and people associated with that Robert Chevery. I never had a verbal conversation with him in my life. He's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with a whole bunch of people who had predicate access with facts intercities at the campuses I went. In effect, they request help and demonstrations be before the World Trade Center attack. In that context, and since interstates, Central Connecticut State University, with a whole bunch of different countries, including people from Saudi Arabia, and that the Saudis and the Americans don't even understand, where they have their relationships not told about, but it's also demonstrable with the Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University, like with this Leahy family, and with a Mark Violet and a Justin Kovinskis, people all along Route 175 involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, planting fake ties, fake natures of ties to people. In other words, they pretended to have a fight to make it look like I went there with them and put fake things to cover up things with the rest of the family, a mother principal and a daughter principal. And I don't know them all. I'm going by confessions of people that also attached me to fake and changed communications with everyone around me and my family since I was a kid. You guys better get them on paper, one name and sequence. If you're a guy. In other words, why are you leaking too? What are you doing with the mayors and the Ayala family, with the fire departments next on Griswold Street and Old Wethersfield and with and in other words, West Hartford and next to Trinity College with the Ayala family and people tied to them, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, increasingly their educators, other people influence them to those syntax. They're not with that on their own. They're planting cover-ups, including with a judge, a judge's family, a Delafair family, and others recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they forged a guy, Dina Fellis, to collusions with them. It has something to do with their roles all along Route 3 and conjunctions to it, like the state judicial branch offices, as people involved with predicate acts with facts in databases with conversations with my teachers about me behind my back that aren't even my class, so they won't engage with it. And they're having repeating things with investigators that are involved with the predicate acts methods that are manifest at countries A through Z. Here, Anthony, vaccines, acute things.